You're going to. No. Q&A. Anything you want to ask these folks?
Could you repeat the last line of what you just said? It kind of got floated away.
Take these up.
I asked for you to reflect on when was or when will be your beginning to take that leap and to be courageous. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry. Not to be too much of a Debbie Downer after some beautiful stories that both of you were very courageous enough to share. But what if you were standing at the edge of that cliff, say, and it looks kind of nasty down there, sharp rocks, crocodiles, possibilities of metaphorical and literal death.
I have
And
no
you
fear
don't
of
know whether or not you have quote-unquote wings or however metaphorically you want to put it. Because everybody can be like, oh yes, get out of our comfort zone and whatnot. But it's different when you're sitting there and you're looking at it and, okay, the option is death, or or we curl up into a bubble and we forget this ever happened. So what do? You know? When it's really, really scary.
Well,
Like freeze your body scary.
I understand that. And the saying is, leap and the net will appear. And you have to just believe. You don't have to know what the net looks like. You don't have to know how far away it is, but you have to believe that it's there. And if your net is death, then that's the net. You can't presume what the net looks like, right? You have to just know that whatever catches you is what's meant to be. That's how I look at it.
See, now, I come from a different school. I'm terribly afraid of heights. No way near it. I get near that. And I really think, like I said, I took a risk management class that says, look where you're going to go, and if it's not the right thing for you, don't do it. Because that's the same thing as, you're afraid. Everybody told you, go look over that edge and look and see if you can take a picture. You don't do that, that's going to scare the hell out of you.
But sometimes you have no choice.
Well, if somebody pushes you, you're going down.
That's the
I'm not going to jump.
Well, interesting, we got a little debate going on here. Okay. She's going to jump, you're going to...
I'm just not going to jump, that's all. You'll have to push me.
There's a bumper sticker that says, Humpty Dumpty was pushed.
And look what happened to him.
There's a lot of ways to look at a lot of things. And one of the reasons we're at this retreat today is to explore what it is to be outside of our comfort zone. I've been pushed out of my comfort zone so many times. I have a lot more stories, trust me. But what has always happened, and maybe because I'm an eternal optimist, is the net has been there. And whether I fabricated it or manifested it myself, or the divine intervention happened and I was caught, I've always been able to be resilient and find a way to keep going. And the point is to enjoy the fall, to enjoy the gifts of what happens when we are out of control. And those are our opportunities. That's where the growth really, really happens. And that was the point I was trying to make.
And you did very well.
Just a comment I'd like to make. With this pandemic, it's been amazing to me me to see how many people have stepped forward with new creative ideas, different ways of doing things. In Gaithersburg, you probably saw in the news, there's a group of people that responded to the fact that so many kids were at home. They didn't have desks, they didn't have places to claim their own so that they could put their books and do their homework. So this group of people got together and just started this, assembly line of creating desks and giving them to children who needed them. In New York City, maybe you saw in the news, they're creating these bubbles on patios so that people can dine and stay somewhat safe. All the musicians who are creating these wonderful shows on television to share their gifts of music and drama. And I think you do create your net. You're falling, but you're also using this human ingenuity and creativity that we all have to weave that net.
I agree with you, absolutely.
Good point.
Yeah.
Jim, you have a question?
There's a tendency, nevertheless, to try to mitigate risk. You see what you had to go through, and maybe you try to make it easier in the next generation. There's so many stories like yours where people grew up with abuse and then entered into an abusive relationship. What have you done with your daughters to try to break that cycle?
Well, I have one daughter and 2 sons.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I misheard you.
And communicate. Be the mother that my mother was not. Try to change the patterns and be forthright and honest. Our generation, I don't know about you guys, but we didn't even know our parents were having surgeries and things like that. Everything was so secret. You're like, yeah, everything was so secretive and kept from us. And that's why the abuse patterns continued, because nobody talked about them at all. And it was all skirted under the carpet. And I didn't do that. Now, has it helped? I do think it has helped. I'm very close to my children. But I made a very conscious decision early on to not be like my mother. And that meant staying away from alcohol. I mean, I just didn't want to go there. Now, a lot of people don't do that. They become alcoholics and they just continue. It takes consciousness and strength and courage to say, this doesn't work anymore. I'm going to, the change begins with me. And that's the decisions that I make. Yeah.
I have 2 questions, one for you and one for you. First of all, how did you forgive your mom? Because if it were me, I would still be holding a grudge against the witch.
It's a process. It's a process, definitely. And it's only happened quite recently, in the last couple of years, did I even realize I needed to forgive my mom. But yeah, you did. But forgiveness, I have a whole speech on forgiveness, and forgiveness is the gift we give ourselves. And once you realize that, because she's gone, she's been dead for years. But the forgiveness I gave it to myself as my own gift, to let it go, because it was doing me no good. It was holding me back, as a matter of fact, in my own growth. So yeah, it's a process.
And you sort of grew up as to use your words, none. No concept of God, you didn't have SWAT. And then all of a sudden, one day, God shows up. Was it a little difficult adjusting to that?
To
Having no concept of God and then there being a concept of God somehow?
I should say that I had a concept of God, just not that he had anything to do with me. In fact, I can remember a buddy of mine, we were down in Florida, we went to one of those tent things, and we were sitting in the back because we snuck in, and, you know, they're doing the holy roly thing and all that stuff, and one lady's up against the tent pole, and the whole tent started shaking. And so my opinion of religion at that time was, you know, like, this is ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
But slow, and I didn't just all of a sudden change. I had a Catholic wife, very Catholic, and I still do. It's my first wife. And I had 5 daughters, and as they all went to Catholic school, and I stayed home, and pretty soon I just sort of started going to church, just because I was tired of sitting at home and feeling guilty. And then one day I helped the beer booth at the festival at the church. And I said, well, if they can drink beer, I can too, so I'll go see the priest. And when I saw the priest become a Catholic, he said, do you have any doubts? I said, yeah, I don't think it's fair my dog doesn't get to go to heaven. And so he said, that's okay. In your case, we're going to make an exception. It was a slow process, but the marriage encounter was the one that really said, okay, now you're going into the pros. You're no longer an amateur.
Right.
You're into the pros. And even then, again, it's easy to say that this happened, but lots of doubts and fears. When we did marriage encounter talks, I had to write what I was going to say for the different talks. And I would go in, and then we would have a team that would look it over and say what's good and bad. When I'd leave, I'd have maybe 3 words left. And it was like, this is a hard lesson. And it was. It was a terrible hard lesson. But again, in a sense, you say, I got to jump that way because there's nowhere else to go. I mean, I could back up. Yeah, I could do that. I could be something I certainly didn't want to be. So I always had religion. My mom, like I said, wanted to be a Catholic. So on the radio, and you remember I'm old, we didn't have TV. Radio would have the rosary every week, at least I think it was. And we didn't get to listen to our shows anymore because Mom had her rosary on such. But the reason we were poor is because my stepdad had lost all the muscles in his shoulders, and there was no such thing as welfare in those days. So, yeah.
Oh, joy.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Can you tell us what you do now?
What I do now? I currently have my own real estate company. I've been in real estate for 18 years. But I have, my passion is speaking. And I...
Notice that.
You can tell.
Glad I went first.
And as I'm getting older, I'm going to transition more in that direction. That's what fills me up. Being able to speak not only my truth, but I know I touch people. I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in your body language, and that's what I believe is my gift. It took a long time to find it, but I've got a lot of great stories that I know resonate with people and help them think about things, reflect on things, and if I can change someone's opinion or thoughts about how they look at things that will help improve their lives, there's nothing better than that for me.
How did you meet Tom?
I met Tom, I had my real estate office next to his office.
Oh.
But when this is true story. I don't hold any punches. True story. The first time I met Tom, I loved his energy. Oh my gosh, he just has. I'm sure you all know this way about him. It was a peacefulness off of him that I have rarely feel. I'm an empath, so I feel pretty intensely other people's energy. And I just was so drawn to him, and we talked right away. I lost my husband 9 years ago, and that's a whole other speech about being pushed out of the cage, but we'll save that for another time. But we talked about him, and he was just such a great listener. And I decided in that moment that I really wanted to go talk to him again. But a year went by, because that's what happens with life, right? We get in our groove and boom, boom, and things happen. And then I sublet my space to another company. And Tom came in the day that I was handing over the keys, and I thought, this is my chance. I get to talk to this man now. He's not a neighbor. This is not any business involved. I can just tell him my heart. And so I go and talk to him. And he asked me to come here. So I'm very, very thrilled for that.
Sheila, I'll pay you later for asking.
Sure, I'll pay you later for asking that.
Yes.
Sorry, picking both of your brains, but this is interesting to me. What was it in...
Cynthia,
Oh,
hold it down so I can hear you. Okay.
what was it in either of you, both of you, you probably both have different answers to this question, that decided, okay, easy road is not for me. Turning back is not for me at this or that juncture. Easy road is BS. Like, we're leaping now, and we're taking the hard road, and we're fighting, and we're scratching, and we're surviving, period, regardless of whatever. How did you come to that decision, and how did you come to that decision?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned in my story, I was in a very bad marriage. I knew I had made a mistake. On my honeymoon, I knew I had made a mistake. And I was hanging in there out of my belief system that I was committed to being in a marriage. I was, things weren't really that bad and all that stuff that we tell ourselves. But after 11 years, I couldn't say that anymore. And I just saw myself, I know that if I had stayed, I probably would have killed myself, quite frankly, because I was that miserable. I was so miserable. So when you have a decision of, do I stay in this even though I really can't do it, or I need to leave no matter what the consequences, I chose life. I chose strength, courage. That's what I chose. So that's where my decision came from.
Gotcha.
In my case, it's, again, I'm the kind that sort of would love to back off, but every time I backed off, the door was closed. And so, yeah, I had to sort of jump to that next step. But a big difference is, it's not a difference, but I have a fantastically wonderful family now. My 5 daughters, my wife. I don't get to make decisions on my own. I mean, I live with 6 women and 2 female dogs. I don't know why we had female dogs, but that's what we had. Now the cats, that's different. There's a male cat now. Tigger loves me. I always hated cats, but Tigger, he won't let me sit down without being on my laps. But again, it's a little different. You only have certain choices you can make to go forward in the first place.
Right.
I'm not going to become president of the United States. I certainly would never want that job. And I'm not even aiming towards those things. And I think one of the things in Palmer's book was, you say, you've got to understand what you can do and what you can't do and where you can go and where you can't go. And then you take the optimum choices from that.
Gotcha.
So a lot of times I would have really backed off, and sometimes I did, done things that could have made a big difference in my life. But in Jim's case, I'm not the brave one that just goes up and says, hey, let's jump. I'm one, you sure? So I'm different that way.
Or the girls in your family push you.
Oh, they still do.
Gotcha.